Hello and welcome to episode 115 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is October 25th, 2021. And as you can see, I'm wearing my new loop, my new cowl. It's the Wave at the Rainbow cowl by Stephanie Lopvin out of her book Knit Happy with Self-Striping Yarn. And I'm really happy with this. I showed it last week as my finished object, and then I hadn't washed it yet, and I said that when I wash it, I don't want to block it. I don't want it to lie completely flat, but I want to dry it in a way that the three-dimensional structure of the pattern remains, and that's what I did. So I think it's a little less pronounced than it was straight after knitting, but I'm still very happy with what it looks like and how it feels. And yeah, so my stripes are a lot smaller than hers in the original, but as I said, I'm really happy with it. The color is one of the Opal colors that you can buy in Japan. So it's it's called KFS yarn, but it's by Opal, and Martina Umemura is sort of responsible for selling the Opal yarn in Japan. And I got this skein of yarn when I was in Japan 2 years ago. And I used the blue Opal Beauty out of the Beauty series yarn for the edges. So that's even softer than this yarn. And I think it's a nice contrast. And I'm really happy with it. And I know not everybody likes the blue stripe that I put on the edge. But if I wanted to wear it with something where there wasn't as much blue, I could just fold it in and it would be completely invisible. But especially with the blue pullover like this, I think it's quite nice to have this edge, sort of to have a transition from the pullover to the cowl. So I'm really happy with that. The pullover I'm wearing is, it's more like a tunic. It's fairly long. That was a Lana Grossa yarn called, I think it was called Baby Kid, and it's a mohair mix. And it's a top-down raglan that I made up, so I didn't use a pattern for this. I just picked a lace pattern, and I think the sleeves were knit straight, but they just, because the way it hangs, it seems to be wider down here than up here, but it was basically knit straight. And I think, I'm not quite sure whether I did not increase stitches. Maybe I used a bigger needle to do the lower part than the upper part. I don't remember, it's such a long time ago that I knit it. Yeah, but it's one of my favorite pullovers. It's really soft and I love the color, as you might have guessed. And I think those two pieces go together really nicely. Yep, and I'm really happy with what I'm wearing today. Okay, on to finished objects. I have 3 finished objects. And I cast on 4 new projects last week, which is a bit crazy. And one of my excuses is that one of the projects I officially started last week, but in effect I started it the week before. And also one of the new cast-ons is one of the finished objects. So that was a very tiny project. But anyway, sometimes things work out that way. And I'm only going to show you 3 of the new cast-ons because one of them is it's sort of a mystery. It's not a mystery pattern. It's just that I don't want to show it because it's a birthday present and the person watches my videos and I want to surprise her. So after the birthday, after I've given it away, I will show you. Yeah, but my finished objects. I'll start with the newest one. Usually I start with the oldest one, but I'll start with the one that I cast on last week and finished last week. And it's this little piggy. This is a free crochet pattern. It's in German. I'm not sure there's an English version, but it was put out by an organization that's called BUND. And they are a organization who I think mostly help animals, but probably also the environment. I'm not quite sure what their main focus and goal is, but I know that they work for animals a lot, and they decided that while the new government in Germany is forming, they want to do something to remind the politicians to think about the children, not the children, the animals in Germany. So they want to make sure that the rules and regulations for how to raise animals and how to keep animals are being changed. And they've asked people to crochet pigs and send them to Berlin so that they can use them in whatever they are planning. And I only learned about that last Thursday, but then I sat down on Friday and crocheted this little pig. And I've told as many people as possible about it. So if you have time to crochet a pig and you can send it to Berlin before the end of the month, that'd be perfect. And then they will use it in their whatever they're planning. They're planning some demonstration or something. And one of my friends, she already crocheted a pig. She started on Saturday. I guess she finished it yesterday and she brought it round this morning. So there's already 2 pigs that I can send off to Berlin. And the funny thing is we used the same instructions. We used the same yarn. She used a smaller needle than I did, but I'm such a tight crocheter that my piggy ended up being smaller than hers. But I think they like each other a lot, and they are going to travel together. And anybody who brings a crocheted pig by Thursday noon, I will send them off together with those 2 to go to Berlin. Yeah, so that's finished object number 1. Then finished object number 2 are the little wrist warmers that I knit out of the alpaca silk yarn by Hansa Farm. And I'm really happy. They're fairly short, but I think they're perfect just to keep your wrist warm. The black and grey is a fairly neutral color, so you can basically wear it with everything. A friend of mine is knitting these out of black, dark grey and dark red, and they look beautiful. I've seen the beginning of one of them, and the colors look really nice together. So they have 2 different cuffs, so you can wear it this way or that way, and they will probably be a Christmas present for someone. So I have lots of yarn left over. These are 50-gram balls of yarn with 200 meters each. So I only used, with the light grey and the dark grey, I only used very little. And even with the black, which is the main color, I used, I think, less than half a ball of the ball of yarn. So I could knit several more pairs of wrist warmers or something else. We'll see. The next project I'm planning with this yarn will not be black and grey, so I'll see what I do with the leftovers later. That's project number 2, and the projects keep growing, and the third finished object for this week is my Glacier dress. It's the pattern Glacier tunic by Jorge Locatelli. I meant to bring the book and show the original. I forgot to do that. But anyway, I'll show you my dress. So I've finished knitting it. I wove in most of the ends. I haven't washed it yet. So again, I can show you what it looks like. Not washed. I think for the upper part and the sleeves, there won't be a lot of difference after it's washed. But this is what the lower edge looks like. And right now it keeps flipping over, and the tips are a bit wonky, but I think I will block it so that everything will be straight. I don't want to block it out really severely. I don't want it to grow a lot. It's okay for it to grow a bit because it's not too long on me, but I think all I will do after I wash it is lay it flat and pin it down so the edges are straight. And so I hope that will look nicer once it's been washed. But otherwise, I'm really, really happy and really pleased with this dress. As I said, it's not too long on me. This bit is about midway down my thigh, and the points go a little bit below my knee, so it's nowhere too long, but I think it's really nice and I can't wait to wear it. Can't wait for it. Yes, I'll probably wash it today or maybe tomorrow, and then I can start wearing it, and if the weather allows, I'll wear it next week. Yep, so I used 5 different colors of opal yarn. I think, so this was the Energy series. I think this was a subscription yarn, so a one-off kind of color. No, it wasn't. This was the comedy. I think this was the subscription yarn. This was ice cream. And this one was, can't remember what it was called. Yeah, but anyway, it's a fairly old series by Opal, so you probably won't get it anymore. But I think Opal colors really look nice together, so if you want to knit something like that, you just start picking colors and collecting colors. I think there's many different versions that you can knit up with their wonderful yarn. Yeah, so these are all my finished objects for this week. And as I said, to make up for the ones that I finished, I've cast on quite a few new ones. But before I get into that, I will start with my works in progress, and I'll start with the socks as usual. I didn't cast on a new sock. Actually, I did not knit on any of the Sockmadness socks, so neither the Madeline socks nor the bonus pattern socks got any work done. Still haven't found the beads. Still haven't really searched for them thoroughly, so we'll see what happens there. But I did knit a little bit on the socks for my sister, the mohair alpaca socks. The mohair is, this ball is getting really small, but I know that it's, when I think it's getting to an end, I can usually knit quite a lot before it actually ends. So I'm not panicking yet. And as I said, I do have a second ball of yarn in that color. So I can definitely finish the sock to be as long as the other one without running out of yarn. It's just, I'm just very interested to see whether you can do a pair of those socks with one ball of mohair silk yarn or whether you need to. And if it's not enough, I will make a note of where I was in the sock when it was gone, so then I can calculate how long a sock you could knit with just one of them. Because this is a spiral sock, so it doesn't have a heel, so you can make them a bit longer or shorter, and they will still fit a lot of people. And you could make it so that you can knit both socks with the one ball of yarn. So that's the one sock, and then the second sock I did put work in are the Dubai socks. I want to knit the sock couple, his socks and her socks, in that pattern by Mina Phillip from the Knitting Expat. And I'd basically finished the cuff last week. I was still debating on how long to make the sock last week, so I did say the cuff was finished, but then I decided because of the cable pattern, it's fairly tight. Considering I'm knitting with 72 stitches, which is usually rather big, they're not as big as I wanted them to be. So I thought I won't make the cuff too long. So as long as they're wide enough to get the foot in, they won't be too tight up the legs, because usually the lower bit of the leg is not that wide. So I basically started knitting the heel after last week's video, and I've started knitting the foot. So the sole will be just stockinette stitch, and I'm continuing the pattern on the top of the foot. And I will knit a little bit further, and then I will ask my husband to try them on. They're not for him, but because he has a man's foot which is a lot bigger than mine, I can see whether or not he's able to comfortably put them on or take them off, and then I can decide whether they are big enough for the recipient. So because these were supposed to be his socks, so yeah, I'll need my husband to try them on. So these are all the socks that I'm showing today. The next project is a one of my small sock yarn projects, and that's the next pattern battle. So I keep telling you about the Opal Abo, which is the subscription that I have where I get 6 balls of yarn every 3 months. And it's always a surprise what color we get. We never know whether or not the color will be available later on or not. Maybe it's just a one of a kind of colorway. And so this one was chosen from the last parcel to be the color for the pattern battle, and everybody who's taking part in that has to use this color, and he or she has to knit a different pattern than the others. So I decided to knit a hat called Circle and Square by Martina Behm. So you know that I love Martina Behm's patterns, and this is a very special one again. You start off knitting an oval like this, and the pattern calls for 2 different circular needles. So I'm using one with an orange cable that my sister gave me, which goes really nicely with this yarn. And on that cable, I have 2 different needle tips. And surprise, both of them are from my sister. And so these used to be her needles, and she broke the other one. So she used to have 2 green and 2 purple ones. She broke one of each, and then she gave the other one to me because she doesn't like to have different tips. She likes her knitting projects to look nice and beautiful. And to her, this isn't beautiful. I love it. I love the many colors. So I have an orange cable, I have a purple and a green tip. I just love it. I think it's fantastic with this yarn. So this is one of the circular needles, and the other one is a fixed circular needle, so you can't screw the needles on or off. And this is one of the boring needles. It has a black cord and just the brown tips, but it's great to be able to differentiate them. Hasn't stopped me from using the wrong tip. So what I'm supposed to do is when I knit the stitches on this cable, I'm supposed to use this needle, and the same here. And what I did once is I used this needle to knit those stitches, and then when I got here, I only had a cable. I didn't have a needle tip, so I had to put the stitches back onto this needle. It's a bit complicated, but it's not too difficult. You just have to pay a little bit of attention, and sometimes I don't. Yeah, so that's what happened, and it kind of looks as if that was the top of the hat and you'd be knitting the hat top down, but that's not what you do. That'd be way too boring for Martina Behm. So what you're actually doing is knitting the hat from front to back. So this is going to be the front of the hat, and I'm sort of knitting backwards and sideways at the same time. And as you can see, you will only be able to see half of the oval once you wear the hat, and those stitches will later get knit together and then close to the round, and then the decreases at the back of the hat, they will just be one layer and they will form a square. That's why the hat is called Circle and Square, because that kind of looks like a circle and the back will be a square. Very weird construction, very genius construction. Can't wait to finish and wear this hat. So this is the Circle and Square in the pattern battle in the Opal Abo group on Ravelry. New cast on. Yep. Then the next, that's the new pattern battle. I'll show you the old pattern battle. This was the color that we used in the last pattern battle. Again, you can see it's Abo, it's the subscription yarn. And I was able to get a second ball of yarn. Usually everybody just gets one ball of every color, but I have several friends by now who have the same subscription, and then sometimes we swap, and I was able to give away 2 colors that I wasn't too interested in, and I got this and I got the red yarn out of this box. And so I am knitting the Town Square Shawl by Romy, and I used the first ball of yarn to knit a bit below the green stripe, and now I'm using the second ball of yarn, and I'm in the last chart of the pattern. And last time I think this is stockinette patch was forming, and now I think it's almost closed, so you can see the eyelets going in this direction now. And I think there are 2 new stockinette patches forming now. I hope I'll be able to show them to you next week. The number of stitches are still increasing, so it takes a while to knit those pattern rows. The wrong side rows are just purl rows, so that's nice. And I hope to finish this as quickly as possible, as I've told you I'm already knitting the next pattern battle. So that's that. Then the next sock yarn project, that's not socks, is this one. That's the that's a square shrug I'm knitting, and it's sort of a pattern that I'm making up myself. So the idea to knit a square and then sew 2 seams is not from me, it's out of a book, but I chose the lace pattern that I wanted to be in this square, so that the lace pattern and the square itself line up nicely, because in the book that I knit from before, the pattern didn't line up with the square, and I didn't like that. So I attached the 3rd ball of yarn to this project. This is one of the 100 Wasser colors. So the colors in the yarn are inspired by this painting by the artist 100 Wasser, and this is what the yarn looks like knit up. So as the stitch pattern changes every other round, so the yarn colors come out differently all the time, which I think is really interesting. And I decided that I'm going to, so I just started, probably have to show on this needle, I just started the next lace pattern that's in the middle of each of these diamonds. So I will finish this diamond off, and then I will not start a new lace pattern in the next field, and then I will start finishing the project. Sounds a bit funny, start finishing, but you know what I mean. I think it's quite big enough, and once I finish that pattern repeat, I will have 7 of these diamonds thingies on top of each other, and that should be big enough. And I'm really looking forward to getting this done as well. So let's see how long it's going to take me. So that's that. Then yeah, there's one more project out of sock yarn that I'm going to show you. That's not a knit along, and that's another Martina Behm pattern, and I showed you the beginning last week. It's her cowl called Tubularity, and last week I showed you the beginning triangle, and then I had just started knitting this bright color, and now I finished both the mini skeins I had out of my advent calendar by Wolldacke. So this bit is the really bright yarn, and I just loved knitting it. I loved watching the colors as they appeared on my needle, and I started knitting the next color, which is this one. So this is more white and green, white and blue and green, and so this is the transition. It's in the original, Martina uses very different colors, so you have very clear lines of where the colors start and end. With mine, because they all have a white base, it's less harsh but still fairly clear, and I really like the way it looks. I'm really looking forward to knitting on that and to seeing all the colors come together. I'm really happy with that. So that's the Tubularity, and then I'll show you another new cast on, and I already told you that there's one cast on I'm not showing you, but yeah, at some point I'll show you the finished object after I've given it to the recipient. Now the next project I'm knitting is out of this book. The English title is Knitting Around. Is it Knitting Around? Knitting from the Center Out. It's knitting from the center out, and all the projects in this book are knit in the round, and there are several hats in this book, and I am knitting a mix of this hat, which is just a very long straight hat, and this hat, which has a nice brim but also a texture pattern. And my son has been asking for a wizard's hat for a long time, and now we finally sat down together and chose a yarn and talked about how I might be able to do that. And so I'm going to mix those two patterns. I'm going to knit a wizard's hat with a brim, but without the structured pattern, without the knit purl pattern. And this is what I have so far. So my son wears only black, and he wanted a black hat. And we chose the alpaca yarn by Hansa Farm. It's called Alpaca. It means you can wash it in the washing machine, which is good news for me, but also for him. I'm holding the yarn doubled, and I'm using a fairly small needle. I'm using a 4.5 millimeter needle, which is quite tight, but I wanted the hat to be as tight as possible to make sure it's going to stand upright, and also to make it really warm, and to make sure that it will keep the rain off a little bit. Won't keep the rain off forever. It's not watertight, but it will sort of repel some of the rain. And for knitting that hat, the pattern calls for 6 needles instead of 5. That's because of how the increases are placed. And at the beginning, or if you follow the pattern in the book, the increases are they don't happen very often. I'm not sure how to say that, but to get a hat that's that pointy, you have to increase very slowly. And then when I got to this bit, I started measuring and calculating, and I thought if I keep going that in that pace, this hat will be at least half a meter high. And I thought that's going to be too high. It won't be able to stand. So I decided to double the rate of the increases. So if you look at it, you can see that the line of the hat, this is a different angle than this. So that's where I started doubling the increases, and it's still not big enough in the round. So it's still not big enough to put a head in. So I'm still increasing, and as soon as I have enough stitches to go on his head, I will do a straight bit for him to wear, and then I will do the brim. And I hope I can make a brim that's not going to flop down too much, but we'll see about that when we get there. So this was a project that we talked about for a very long time, and now is just the right moment for it to get started. So it's not one that I have been planning to cast on right now, but I'm glad I did, and he's looking forward to receiving his hat. So that brings me to the knit-alongs, and the little knit-along we're doing is still the Geckolino Shawl, and I added a few rows to that. So last time I was still in the garter section. Now I did the eyelet row, and the pattern says to now do some short rows to make sure that the ends are long enough so you can tie it around your neck. But as I am using a thicker yarn than called for, and everything is getting bigger anyway, I decided I won't do the short rows. I will just see how far I get with my 150 grams of DK weight sock yarn, Opal yarn Paradise. It's their new series, new colors in this heavier weight. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be long enough to tie around even without the short rows. And I hope to get a bit more depth into the shawl. And I think that's more important. For me, at the moment, that's more important. I want it to be bigger on the whole and not just the long tips. So that's that. Not a big difference, but I did put a bit of work in. And the other knit-along, the Optic blanket, I want to get finished by the end of the year. So as I missed some of the weeks where I wanted to knit a square, I decided to try and catch up a bit. So last week I actually managed to knit 2 squares. Let me see. I think this must have been the one that I showed you last week. I think so. And I think I knit this one and this one last week. And that means I finished my square of 9 squares. And what I usually do when I finish one, I'll show you the others that I've done before, just to remind you and just for me to see how far I got. So this was the last one I knit, and then the others I'm not quite sure what order I knit them in, but they all look differently. They look different. I made them differently. So this might have been the first one. Maybe this was the first one. I don't know. It doesn't matter. So I've done 5 now, which means I only need to do 1 more, because the plan is, they're quite heavy if I hold them all in one go. So the plan is to have the blanket 2 of those squares wide and 3 of those squares long. And I'm really looking forward to, once I finish all the pieces, I'm going to lay them out and then figure out how I want to sew them together. That should be really nice. And then it's 2 long seams, and no, it's 1 very long seam and it's 2 shorter seams. So it shouldn't take too long to sew together. And then I think I have a good chance of finishing the blanket this year. Yeah, so that's everything. It's not everything I knit and crocheted last week, but it's all I wanted to show you. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!